26th of April, and we shall crack on with dram number 94. Yes, 94. So this I'm pretty certain is now the last Lowland Scotch, as far as I'm aware, that at least I've got in the donations that I've been given. So there's still a couple missing, I know that. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but you know where the list is. The list is on the bottom of the screen somewhere. Have a look at that. If there's any Lowlands that are left and you happen to have 2.5 CLs of any of those and you could send them my way, that would be fantastic. So this one is part of a donation from the fantastic Maltman Mike. If you're not following him on Facebook and on Twitter and subscribe to his YouTube channel, then you should be by now, because I've told you enough times and you're not listening. Fantastic bloke, and has actually just reviewed this recently. I think it was last week he reviewed this one, because I think he'd been given a bottle by them for review, which is Pure Scot from Bladnoch. Now the bottle looks like this, and if you watch Mike's review, you'll be aware that that is a pretty chunky bottle. That is going to do some serious damage. You could kill somebody with that. You know, if you had that on a high shelf, it was a bit like the excuse me, it was a bit like the Clandeni. It's coming back. Should we try again? Yeah. It's a bit like the Clandeni bottles that we used to sell, the big old chunky massive thick glass things that could kill a small child if it fell on the head. And it seems like that Pure Scot's the same. Nice bottling though, looks really fancy. So Pure Scot is actually sent out to Australia, because the current owner of Bladnoch is a guy called David Pryor, who was a businessman who made a pretty penny with a probiotic yogurt brand called 5am. Now it doesn't ring any bells to me. I'm not a big yogurt freak, but my wife does have it from time to time, and 5am is not one that I come across. So whether it was big down there, and wasn't really a worldwide brand, but it earned him enough money to go into his second love, which was whiskey, and he bought the Bladnoch Distillery. So Bladnoch I only did a few drams ago, so I won't go too in depth in terms of the history of it, because I've pretty much covered that off only fairly recently. The distillery is here. It is, by my reckoning, the most southerly distillery in mainland Scotland, because it's actually underneath Ailsa Bay, geographically. It was built in 1817 by a family called the McClellans. It was sold to a Belfast whisky merchant in 1911. They went into administration in 1937, and the distillery closed. It was reopened, it was closed, it was reopened, it was closed. It was eventually bought by Diageo, or it was bought by companies that were then bought by Diageo. In 1993, it was sold to a Northern Irish businessman called Raymond Armstrong on the proviso that he couldn't actually distill whiskey. He was going to turn it into like a guest house and a bit of an attraction. That didn't really fall through. He persuaded Diageo to let him then start distilling again. One of his bottlings was the one that I tried, that was donated by Andrew Butler, that was very, very good indeed, the lightly peated version. It closed again in 2008 when he went bust. Was it 2008? No, 2014, sorry. 2014 closed again because his business went into liquidation, and then David Pryor bought it. So he has bought also the bonded warehouse. So he has bought not only the distillery, but also the remaining stocks that were there. So he can use that in this. And I was just reading up an interview with him as well, and it sounds like he is also going to be using some of the single malt stock to do like a no age statement expression, where he's going to be using anything between 8 and 25-year-old stock that he's got in cask already as a non-age statement Bladnoch to release into the market. So it'd be interesting to see how much that is, and also how good it is. So this will be using some Bladnoch, I'm almost certain. I don't know what else is in this. Couldn't really find out too much information on it. Can't remember what Mike said in his video, so have a look at his video as well. It's well worth checking out, and he did have the actual bottle there himself. But I'd be willing to bet that the grain whiskey that's in the blend is probably from Girvan, because it's not that far away, and he could probably do a deal with them one way or the other. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what this is. So in terms of price, I don't actually know, because it doesn't appear to be for sale in the UK. So my guess would be it's going to be of the affordable side. It might be kind of like the premium but not super premium blends. It might not be like Hay Club levels of stupidity pricing, but I would be willing to bet that they're probably not going to go into the Aussie market as, you know, we're going to go in as a Bell's cheaper end. We're going to push for the premium, particularly looking at the bottle as well. So, pure Scot. Now, I'd be willing to bet that there's been some colouring that's added to this, because it is a pretty healthy dark colour for a blended whisky. And it's got that slightly artificial note that I associate with blends that have not quite got the balance right and have got a little bit too much colouring in. There is that edge of grain whisky, but there's just this slightly artificial sweetness in there. It's slightly plasticky, and it's just a little bit too overpowering. Okay. Fortunately, on the palate, it's not actually there. It's pretty smooth. There's a little bit of oakiness in there. There is some sweetness. There's a bit of maltiness to it as well. It's quite nicely well-rounded. Not much of a finish. Not necessarily a bad thing. Because what's there isn't enough to really linger through. Just going to check it's 40%. Yeah, it is 40% as well. Do you know what? It's not actually that bad. It's much, much better on the palate than it is on the nose. On the nose, there's just this slight hint of kind of like artificial sweetness, and it just puts me off slightly. It's a nose that I associate with like cheaper blends, where it almost seems like they've kind of shoved too much caramel colouring in, because it must have started off almost absolutely pale, and they've put like loads in, and that artificial flavour kind of overpowers everything else. On the palate, it's not there. It's very smooth. It's quite rich. It's got kind of a toffee maltiness in there. Like I say, not a huge finish, but it's decent. You know, it lasts long enough. It doesn't just completely disappear. It's not actually that bad. I think it's more for mixing in cocktails than it is for drinking straight. But it's not that bad straight, actually. A little bit of smokiness came through then as well. Quite caught me by surprise. Just right at the end, this like little burst of kind of slightly peppery, slight barbecue bonfire smoke came through as well. I wonder whether they've got any of that lightly peated Bladnoch stock in there, and they've just put some of that in just to finish it off. All in all, it's not too shabby. It's not a world beater, but it's all right actually. It's not that bad. Interesting. Yeah, a bit more of that smokiness is coming through now. Even more so. Interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, I'd be willing to bet that they've used some of this lightly peated Bladnoch stock in there as well, just to lift it a bit, and it actually makes it more interesting. It just gives it a slightly different dimension. Not too shabby. All right, that. Well done, guys. Might need a little bit of tweaking, but doesn't need anything major doing to it. It just needs maybe just ratcheting down the colouring and the artificial vibe that it's kicking out. But other than that, yeah, that's all right. Okay, quick wash out, and then we'll move away from the lowland and we'll go to the other end of the country. So I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.